Hi, I'm Albert Morehouse, former governor of Missouri. I spent many years of my life in Maryville, but I was originally from here. I was originally from Delaware County, Ohio. I was born on a small farm there on July 11th, 1835. Grew up with my parents, my maternal grandfather, and my 6 younger siblings. And when I was about 21 years old, we all moved down to Nottoway County. My father got a farm and became a judge, and I started to teach, just something I'd always wanted to do. I studied law on the side too. I was all set to actually be a lawyer in Montgomery County in Iowa. I was admitted to the bar in 1860, but then the war broke out and I had other plans. I returned to Nottoway County shortly after, and I joined Colonel Kimball's 6-month militia. This militia was made up of mostly men from Nottoway County and kind of loosely organized, but when that 6 months was done, I joined the Missouri State Militia, and we did a bit more traveling. One point, we were in Lafayette County. It's a bit east of Kansas City, and there's this family, the McMaddens, who would always give us this great food, and they would give us tea out in their barn, and I became pretty well acquainted with the daughter, Maddie. And we hit it off pretty well, actually, and you know, once it came time to leave, we wrote letters to each other, keeping in touch, and when the war finally ended a couple years later, I'd made it out of the war alive, so I knew that I'd take advantage of that, and me and Maddie got married in Lexington, Missouri, and then we moved back up to Nottoway County. I was in business with Amos Graham for a little bit, the first clerk in Nottoway County, and for whom Maryville, his wife, is named after. But he died shortly after that, and I went into a real estate / farming business with Nat Sisson and Hart C. Fisher. Ran that for many, many, many years. But anyway, after the war, Missouri had a new state constitution that wouldn't allow Confederate sympathizers or veterans to vote, and I didn't think that was in the best interest of a healing nation. So I started a newspaper to get the word out there about this, the Nottoway Democrat, which is actually still in print today, only it's under the name The Daily Forum. Anyway, that made me a pretty popular political figure, I suppose, in Northwest Missouri, and by the next midterm election a year later, in 1870, that was removed from the state constitution. In 1872, I was asked to go to the Democratic Convention in Baltimore, and I went, and 2 years later, they sent me again to the one in St. Louis, and from then on, I was pretty much a political figure by then. I was a legislator for a couple of terms, and I was a representative for a couple of terms. Spent about a decade in those offices until in 1884, I ran for lieutenant governor with John S. Marmaduke, who was a Mississippi general during the war. And he did not make it through his term, sadly. He succumbed to pneumonia shortly after Christmas in 1887. So I spent the next little over a year as acting governor. Wasn't a whole lot, for me to be remembered by. There was a smallpox outbreak in a couple of counties, but I was able to keep that strict and tight because I followed the Missouri state quarantine guidelines at the time. I helped fund the University of Missouri's botanical school. I also was a advocate for prison reform, as it was pretty bad back then. And during my whole time as in office and as a figurehead, I was one of the most vocal supporters of establishing a normal school, a teacher school in Maryville, which eventually happened, even though it didn't happen until many years after my death. Well, once my year as acting governor was up, I decided to run again. But that didn't go too well. I lost the Democratic nomination to John Francis, and yeah, that was it. Jefferson City was a dull and dreary place anyway. Once 1889 January came around, I was sworn out of office, and I retired from public life, and I decided to finally return to Maryville.